G'day guys, it's Craig here from the Crafty Pint, and welcome back to our series on Aussie hops presented by HPA. Throughout this series, we'll be talking to a bunch of Australia's very best brewers, talking about Australia's favourite hops. Today I'm joined by Jesse Searls, head brewer at Young Henry's, and also Michael MC Capaldo from HPA. Jesse, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. How you going?
Good, thanks for joining me.
No worries, my pleasure. It's always good to talk about Aussie hops and beer in general.
Fantastic. And MC, how are we today?
I'm great. Jesse, stoked that you like to talk about Aussie hops and beer all the time, and that's good. It's all we tend to talk about most of the time, isn't it?
That's right.
Love it. Well, Michael, I might start with you, mate. We're talking today about Topaz. For those new to the world of hops or maybe very familiar with that hop, tell us more about it. What's the background? What's the history of this one?
This is an interesting hop. It's a really cool hop. It's been in our breeding. It was commercialised in 1997, believe it or not. This hop.
Wow.
So it's been around for that long, but in such a small amount. And its history, it's almost in 1997, if we remember where craft brewing was back in the day. Or let's even move away from the term craft beer and towards flavoursome beers and dry hopping beers. No one was really dry hopping back then. So the purpose of Topaz was really a bittering hop. And then as that craft flavour grew and hit mainstream, it really evolved from being simply a start of boil hot side hop to something that was used at end of boil to something that's now used in the dry hop as well. So it's really experienced quite an evolution as a hop varietal.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess the growth of it, like what beers are you seeing the Topaz used in? What are the flavour profiles that you're seeing brewers use the hop for, Michael?
Well, I'll let Jesse speak to the beers because we're on here with the Young Henry's podcast and he can speak to the beers that Young Henry's are brewing with it. But from my perspective as representing the hop farm, when we do raw sensory on it and then we do beer sensory on it, we get some interesting things. We get grapefruits on it. We get lychees and that sort of peachy tropical flavour. I think the thing I like about it is it's the one Aussie hop that I think I get a little bit of pine out off it as well, and that sort of woody tobacco. And I really like that character in it as well. Not sure, Selzy, do you find that sort of character, or is that just my funny nose?
Oh, look, I've never really thought of it in a tobacco sense, but certainly that like earthy complexity behind the forefront of citrus, I definitely know what you mean. And I think it's just another aspect of Topaz that makes it incredibly like versatile and really attractive hop to use.
Yeah, nice. And Jesse, tell me in your experience. So it may have been with Young Henry's. It may have been earlier in your beer journey as well. When did you first kind of come across Topaz, and what was that experience like?
Well, I'm actually coming up on 10 years at Young Henry's, and I don't have any previous beer experience to that, so I can't really. I certainly never used it in my 2 or 3 shocking home brews that I did before I became an actual brewer. But my first experience with it obviously has been working at Young Henry's, and as far as I understand, we actually held considerable contracts of it. I think from 2014 onwards, and we were using it before that, but more in a spot sense. But look, back to what Michael said about it being predominantly historically used as a bittering hop. Certainly, that's how it began with us. It's such a high alpha hop that, and at a great price point, that it certainly was. That was how we utilized it at the start. It still is the first wort addition in all of our core range beers. So we still use it very much hot side, but probably in the last 3 to 4 years have been experimenting more that, later in the whirlpool, and then definitely in a lot of our limiteds, and now in one of our core range products. It's a real main player in the dry hop.
Yeah, wow. And you mentioned, so you're using it across your core range beers. Can you, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with Young Henry's core range, like, can you give me the scope of what different styles does that include? What beers are they in?
Sure. So obviously anyone that is familiar with us probably knows about Newtowner. It's our flagship product. It's about over 50% of our business, and and a real household name in the craft sector of Australia. It's an Australian pale ale. It's Topaz is used in that beer as the bittering hop. And then going across the portfolio, we have natural lager, IPA, hazy pale ale, Stayer, and motorcycle oil rounds out our beer offerings in our core range. We have a few other new lines as well, but certainly in those historical, like real big players in our core range that have been around for a long time, Topaz is used in all of them. So yeah, I think again it really was chosen back then in those sort of formulation of those recipes, and as those recipes have developed, mainly to be a high alpha bittering component, where coupled with its fairly high cohumulin content, we can use it in smaller quantities to give a really nice rounded structured bitterness. We don't pump too much of it in there, resulting in a harsher flavour. And I think we've really dialed in how to use it on the hot side. And now, yeah, as I said before, the last couple of years have really been about learning it in a dry hop sense, which 2 years ago we brought in a new core range beer called HPA, which is an XPA, and I really wanted to showcase Topaz in that beer. So it actually it's in the dry hop at about 30%, which it was funny when I was sort of coming up with a recipe for that beer. The other dry hop, the other hop variety in that dry hop is Galaxy, of course. But I kind of knew that Topaz would it would outcompete the Galaxy in terms of its volume in the dry hop. So it was really amazing to see how much it did, though, because I still think in that beer, even at 30% versus 70%, it really comes to the forefront over Galaxy, which I don't know if it's something about how those two interplay, but it definitely communicates more than the Galaxy in that dry hop, which was a really cool thing to come to the conclusion of, and through the R&D process and all that. And that's sort of something that we've taken that learnings into other limited beers, and sort of knowing that we can use Topaz in a restrained way, that it really contributes a lot more than the sum of its parts.
You've mentioned, Jesse, a few things like around, it's at a really great price point, and you can use it in different ways where you use a small amount to get a big impact. And is that sort of one of the key points of difference to other hops on the market? You're getting a lot of, I guess, bang for your buck with Topaz, or how else do you see the real strengths of this hop?
I mean, there's definitely elements of that, but at the end of the day, for me, like, it's something that I really trust, hot side, and that again, like, it's really proved that it's much more versatile and less. It's got a real dynamic and flexible nature to itself. So I think definitely, yeah, there is a commercial attraction there, that it is like, yeah, high alpha, fairly low cost, but I think it brings a different variety of flavors and aromas to the dry hop compared to other more popular Australian hops. So Capaldo, you touched on that, but definitely I get a real much more complexity, and it's sort of less like it has these high touchstones of flavor and aroma, and it has a more broader spectrum of things that it can contribute to finished beer. But yeah, I mean, it's a really great value hop. Again, like we use it in pretty small amounts in hot side, and to a great effect. But yeah, it's just a real point of difference for me, and I don't see it used in a lot of other beers I see on the market, and I really feel like it's an underutilized hop, and it's sort of a bit misunderstood, and it's sort of got a lot more strings to its bow than just as a bittering hop.
And mate, let's talk brewing tips and tricks and techniques and so on for a moment. You say you use Topaz both on the hot side very effectively, but also through dry hop and so on. Are there any kind of things you've learned over your nearly 10 years with Young Henrys on just how to get the most out of that hop?
Yeah, I mean, um, I think the adage, like, less is more, sometimes can really help, especially on hot side.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're going through that sort of R&D process and scaling up from, your pilot system to commercial size batches, sometimes things don't translate in a linear fashion. So keeping that in mind, that you kind of want to err on the side of caution with bitterness, is really important, and we've learned the hard way in the past. But we've messed around with the Topaz a lot in dry hopping it in the early stages of fermentation. So we employ sort of a trick that, if we want to help clarify beers, we'll dry hop on 0 day, as in, we've knocked out the last of the wort into fermenter, and before fermentation's even kicked off, we'll literally do a small charge of some hops to help. I learned all this actually in the States at CBC a few years ago, but they've done a bunch of research over there into haze, like effect on haze, and how early or late you're dry hopping. And one of the big findings of that was, I think her name's Laura. I can't remember her last name, but she works for Omega Yeast. But one of the big findings was that dry hopping early, and especially day 0, it kind of acts as like this turbocharged, glucosidase, which contributes to biotransformation, and sort of just churns through all those haze positive molecules. And we've used Topaz in that way really, really effectively. So we've dry hopped a small charge, maybe a gram a litre, into the fermenter on day 0 or day 1, whatever you call it, and seen a really great reduction in haze further down the line. We've used it sort of day 4. We've used it when we typically dry hop it at the end of fermentation when we're VDK negative. We've used it as a tool in trying to get hop creep out of the way. It just seems to be a really active hop wherever you put it. Like, you can apply that to it being hot side. You can apply that to it being dry hopped, in the dry hop. It seems to just really bring a lot to the table. And, I don't pretend to understand the full-blown molecular science of how that's happening with Topaz, but it really does seem to have that expression.
Sounds like you understand it a hell of a lot better than I do, Jesse. Mate, let's talk kind of pairings. You said you've used Topaz across such a broad range of styles of beer and so on. What other hops do you find play really nicely with Topaz?
I was actually looking back through some of the recipes that we've used it in recently, because I've got another thing coming up that I want to use it in. And one thing I found and I remembered from this beer was that we used it in a majority mosaic dry hop. And I get this thing from Mosaic. I'm not sure if everyone else does. Like, obviously Mosaic is a really, it's a rock star hop. Like, all the big boys use it. It's really part of that trilogy, Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe. But I get this thing from it, and don't get me wrong, I love Mosaic, but I get this slight sort of almost butyric note sometimes from it, especially when that beer that it's in is sort of getting a little long in the tooth. But it throws these, I don't know, overripe mango. Like, it's a little bit sickly, but in a kind of nice way. And I feel like where there's been 2 beers where we've used Topaz as sort of like not the star player, but a supporting cast, and with the star player being Mosaic, and it's really rounded that out. I feel that Topaz really sort of contributed this other layer of complexity and depth that sort of rounded that harshness of the almost sort of like overripe mango vibe that Mosaic can throw. So I think that was one really cool thing that we've sort of discovered just through chance of pairing those 2 hops together. We've used it in a New Zealand focused dry hopped IPA before, which was really cool. It seemed to have this really nice harmony with those sort of New Zealand hops, similar Antipodean New World varieties, like much more tropical, fruit forward, but it worked really well in that beer. Again, I think it's sort of really, you got to experiment with what works for you and on your equipment and your brewery. But certainly, we've had a lot of success with using it with Mosaic to really contribute and equal something greater than the sum of its parts.
That's fantastic. MC, Topaz, you mentioned earlier on, it's been kind of a core component of the HPA stable since the 90s. It's been such a long-standing hop varietal and probably outlasting quite a few others on the market in that time. Why do you think it's been such a consistent performer, such a stayer?
It's interesting. I think it's had a few different life cycles. So we've talked about the bitterness component and that lifestyle, and now we talked about the fact that it's getting used more and more in dry hop or whirlpool. Not just in Australia, but overseas as well. In the US, we're seeing an uptick in the Aussie XPA style, which for them is uh, apparently they're learning a style off us for once, which is pretty awesome. And Topaz is actually, we've had a nice little uptick over there from Topaz going to those style of beers as well. So I think brewers are rediscovering it and using it for its merits. So it's here to stay, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves more and more on the cold side.
It's a versatile performer, like most Australian hops, I would say. But thank you so much, guys. Jesse, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. No worries.
And MC, thanks for joining us. And this has been another episode of our Aussie Hop Series presented by HPA. If you want to find out more info about our great Australian hops and our hop growing regions, head to hops.com.au. Thanks.